Today's discourse will be a continuing discourse on being human. So this is, as Reverend Lotus mentioned last week, a very large topic. And in an effort to focus it a little bit, I wanted to say that most people are of the opinion that being human means that you have a physical body, you exist in this physical environment, and over time your body decays, and once your body ceases to exist, then your life ceases to exist. So all of their thoughts regarding being human have to do with physical things, the lower triad of the physical, emotional, and mental. What I want to focus on today is what the true reality of being human is. Being human is really a recognition that we are spirit, that we come from spirit. And there's a famous quote, and I believe the author of this quote is Desjardins, and if I mispronounce that, I apologize. My French is not the best. But in any event, he's a French philosopher, and what he said was, humans are really, we're having we're spirit experiencing as humans, as opposed to being humans where once in a while we have a spiritual experience. Really what's happening with humans as we are now in our physical body and on this physical plane, we are slowly evolving back to the source of who and what we are, which is spirit. And this evolution takes a different amount of time for different people. And the great masters have shown us that you can get off of this cycle of rebirth and go back to your true form as spirit. This may take many lifetimes for some. It may take one lifetime for others, but this is the process of evolution that we are currently in. So today I wanted to talk about how we can come to fully recognize that we are spirit and move away from being bound by this lower triad of the physical, emotional, and mental, being bound by sex, money, and power. The attachment to this lower triad is what keeps many, many people stuck in this physical plane and delays their progress of evolution. So, to truly recognize that we are spirit, and to help us move in an evolutionary fashion back to becoming spirit, one of the first things we can do is pay attention. So we've had many discourses here at the Spiritual Lotus on attention, and we like to say that what you pay attention to is what you energize, and what you energize is what you become. So humans have all possibility, and this is due to the fact that we come from spirit, which is a plane of all possibility. So because we are all possibility, what happens in the physical plane that we currently exist in is things are part of our environment that we pay the most attention to. So if we take a step back and take stock of our lives, we can see what we are paying attention to, because what is around us is what we have energized into reality. So are we paying attention to positive things like love and compassion and understanding and joy, so that these things are physically manifest in our lives? Or are we paying attention to and energizing more negative things? Are we paying attention to hatred and discord and limitation and racial distinctions and things like that? We can change things in our lives by changing what we energize and what we pay attention to. This is one of the great gifts of the Godhead and one of the great gifts that we have as human beings existing on this physical plane. Now, paying attention is in and of itself not enough. And let me explain what I mean by that. So you can go to a football game and you're sitting in the stands and you can pay attention in a general sense to the football game. But this doesn't mean that your mind is not wandering to and fro during the game. Perhaps it's wandering to the noise of the crowd, to the cheerleaders on the sideline, to different people that are in the stands with you, occasionally back to the action on the field with the football players. So you're paying attention to the game as a whole, but your mind is going to and fro different things that are occurring within the game. In order for this attention and this energy to be at its best, it needs to be focused. And we call this focused attention. Focused attention is what brings our reality into clarity. And you can get a sense of this when you talk about spirit going into mind and mind going into matter. So the mind is the link between spirit, which is again all possibility, and matter, which is the physical plane around you. If this interconnection between spirit and matter, the mind, is not really paying attention to anything, you really have no control over the matter of your reality. If you have a decent amount of attention, you'll bring some clarity and focus into your reality. You'll have some control over it. If your mind is focused attention, then you can bring from spirit, the all possibility, into clear focus, into perfect reality, whatever your vision is. This is allowing us to connect with our true heritage, which is spirit, and transforming that true heritage of spirit and all possibility into exactly what we want in our physical reality. And when you think about this, what else other than a human is capable of doing this in this physical plane? This is how powerful humanity is and being human is. So I've talked a lot about the physical reality around us. If we look at our physical reality, this is another way of telling us where we are on our evolutionary path back to being spirit. We just have to take a step back and without judgment, without conclusion, look at our reality and analyze what's in it. And once we determine what's in it, then we can determine why that particular thing or that person or that place is in it. So, is our environment full of love? Or is our environment full of hate? Is our environment a combination of love and hate? In our environment, are we focused on sex, money, power, the lower triad? Or are we focused on the higher realities above that? Do we come from a compassionate heart, from a forgiving heart, from a state of peace and calm? So by taking stock of our environment, we are taking stock of ourselves And this gives us insight as human beings again as to where we are on this spiritual path. Not only can we take stock of this, but once we know what's in our environment and why it's there, we can change it. That's another power of being human being. We are co-creators with God. We have the ability to change anything and everything in our environment. And how do we do that? We must go within. All the great masters of every major religion tells their people, you must go within. And this makes sense, really, if you think about it, because within is everything, really. All possibility is within you. And once you change within, that changes the physical environment around you. And that's why your practices are so important. Practices give you discipline. Discipline gives you freedom. Think about that. A lot of people think discipline limits them. But in reality, with your practices, with discipline, you are freed. Freed from attachment, freed from bondage in the physical reality. Through your practices by going within, not only are you freeing yourself, but you're calming your mind, you're calming your emotions, and you're touching your true heritage. You as spirit, you as God. It is this merging with who and what you are within that dramatically and drastically changes everything without. One thing that all humans go through on this physical plane is cycles. You can't get away from cycles. And I wanted to read a passage from the Bible, which is pretty famous about cycles. And this is from Ecclesiastes. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and it's verses 1 through 8. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which has been planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, a time to lose. A time to keep, a time to cast away. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. So I mention cycles, like I said, because every human that is bound by this physical plane of existence must go through these cycles. Everybody must go through these cycles. It's how you handle the cycles that determines where you are in consciousness and how close you are to returning to your heritage as a spiritual being. Everybody is going to go through loss in their life. Everybody will go through gain. Everybody will go through periods of difficulty, periods of sadness, periods of great joy. So how do you handle these different cycles in your life? Do you push against them and resist against them? If you do that, what does the Buddha say? That will cause greater suffering in your life. Or with each of these cycles, do you let them be? so that you are expressing being as a spiritual being. In other words, are you swimming up against the current of the river, or are you floating downstream with the current of the river? One thing that prevents many of us from returning to our spiritual heritage as spirit is attachment. Attachment binds us. If we are attached to people, places, and things in this physical plane, we are bound to this physical plane. And when you are bound to this physical plane, you are moving away from spirit and your true heritage as a spiritual being. I've said many times before, and this comes from Emmett Fox, attachment literally creates these lines of light and energy. So if you're attached to a person, there is lines of light and energy from you to that person. If you're attached to an object, a car, a house, a piece of jewelry, your wallet, money, there are lines of light and energy literally going from you to those objects that you're attached to. Same thing for places, situations. Most people have so many of these lines of light and energy that they are like a fly stuck in a spider's web. They cannot move. They have no idea who and what they are because they're stuck, prevented from going up the mountain to enlightenment. A lot of people misunderstand detachment, which is what we try to do so that we can move back to our true being as spirit. Detachment does not mean lack of love. It does not mean lack of compassion, lack of kindness. In fact, one of the hardest things you could possibly do in this lifetime as a human being is to love without attachment. To do things for others without attachment, without expectation of anything in return. When you're attached, there are expectations. There is this belief that if you do something for somebody, they owe you or should do something in return. And of course, there are varying degrees of this. Detachment is being able to love purely, being able to be forgiving, kind, compassionate, joyous purely. Once we are high enough on the mountain where we're moving away from being bound by our physical body, our conscious mind, our emotions, we start moving towards this identity self, the I am. Many of you are familiar with the burning bush story. So Moses is, he's in the desert and he's literally talking to a burning bush, and the burning bush is God. And Moses is asking God, well, you want me to lead the Israelites, and who am I supposed to tell them is instructing me to help them on their path? What am I supposed to say about that? And what does the burning bush say in response? Tell them Om Tat Sat Om, which is Sanskrit, and this is loosely translated, but Sanskrit for I am that I am. You tell the Israelites, he goes on further, that I am told you what to do. This I am is this pure creative power of spirit. It is the law of identity. It is what we will all eventually return to and become. We will all become I am. The great masters use this law of identity all the time. I am light. I am the doorway. I am the Lamb of God. I am truth. I am wisdom. If you have reached this law of identity, this moving away from bondage of this physical reality, then you have become who and what you are, which is spirit. And this law of identity allows you to be anything and everything at any time. This is what a human is capable of being. Human, light being. We are light, spirit. We literally are everything. And through some of the steps that we shared today, you can come closer to that reality and closer to that understanding. So that's what I wanted to share today. Thank you very much, and at this point we'll have a deep level meditation.